Are you looking for an excuse to finish some of the book series that you have been meaning to finish but haven't gotten to quite yet? That's what I do every year in May with my Finish the Series book challenge. Now, this is only my second year doing it, but I had a great time. So let's start with some of the book statistics, and then we'll get into those books. This year, I completed 7 series and continued with 9 more, which is pretty reasonable considering last May, I finished 6 series and continued with 5 more. So I did a pretty good job. I'm at least improving, if nothing else. Last May was really hard to follow, though, because I finished for the first time the Hyperion Cantos series and the original Foundation trilogy. And that's really hard to follow. So this May was a little bit more balanced, a little bit more mediocre, I would say, but I did get some good ones done. So I have 3 categories for us today. First, the series that I have continued, but still have more to read. And then we have the series that I am completely up to date to publication. And then we finally get to those series that I have completed. Let's get into this. Oh, and I forgot to add that the majority of these books this particular month, where I was traveling a lot, are almost all audiobooks, which is why I think I was able to get done with so many books. But interestingly enough, I also think it was the reason why I had a harder time getting into some of these book series that I think I normally would have really enjoyed had I been able to pick up a physical copy. Let's see what you think. All right, first we are on to the series that I continued. The first book is The Heart of Valor by Tanya Huff. This is the 3rd book in her Confederation of Valor military sci-fi series. This one was a pretty vanilla military sci-fi series, which is okay. It follows Sergeant Kerr and her ragtag platoon members as they go about the universe with different adventures in each book. Each book is very episodic, and it is everything that I love in just my plain Jane vanilla military sci-fi. And this book was no exception. This one definitely had me loving Sergeant Kerr. She's still one of the most competent female protagonists in military science fiction, in my opinion. And I really just had a good time with this book. But it wasn't anything special or of note. So 1 more down in that series. The next one was War Game. This is by Louis McMaster Bujold and is a member of the Vorkosigan saga. So I gotta say that I'm not ever really sure what number these books are, but this book definitely follows Miles, which is one of my favorite protagonists. He is a very fun, disabled main protagonist who always gets out of these survival scrapes because of his quick wit and a lot of luck. And again, the War Game was very similar to that. However, I was really surprised because the War Game won one of the Hugo Awards, and this book was relatively unnotable for me. The next one I picked up was Flesh and Bone by Jonathan Mayberry. This is the 3rd book. Kind of a theme already, right? This is the 3rd book in his Rot and Ruin series, which is a YA zombie series. I just wanted something a little bit light and a little bit fun while I was traveling on the road, and this is exactly what this book gave me. I was really surprised by this particular series because it really uses zombies as a way to help teenagers understand how they grow and mature, to ask the deeper questions that I feel like a lot of YA books these days don't. And I feel like each one of these books always surprisingly elicits a lot of emotion out of me. And I definitely laughed and cried during this book, and I don't say that very easily. So this is definitely a series that I'm going to continue. Then I picked up the book Metro 2034. This is obviously the second book in the series that begins with Metro 2033. Now, I loved Metro 2033, so I was beyond excited to continue with the series, and I have since started the video game inspired by these novels. However, as much as 2033 was one of those books that I really came to love, it was a slog. It was a little bit of a hard journey to get to an explosive, fantastic ending. And in Metro 2034, we're following new characters, and it's a very different tone than the first book. It doesn't have as deep of themes, in my opinion, and it's a very much a Russian romance sci-fi book, complete with incredible depression and an unhappy ending. And I just felt like I didn't love Metro 2034 as much as I loved Metro 2033. Now, I would say if you didn't like Metro 2033, maybe you would love 2034, but just saying, I didn't really enjoy it. I can't wait to get back to my favorite main character in the next book. So we'll move on with this series and kind of slide past this one. The next one is going to be Spec Ops. This one is a second book in the Expeditionary Force series. I really loved this military science fiction series. This is one of my favorite Audible listens, actually. I love the narrator for this one. However, this book kind of suffers just a little bit from some middle book syndrome. While I really enjoyed the dialogue and the banter back and forth between the ship's AI and our main captain character, I really felt like there wasn't enough plot for how long I had to listen to the story. And that's not a great thing to say, but I am still really excited about the characters. I still love the fun, witty banter, and of course, the narrator. So I will be continuing with the series, but I'm really hoping that it improves in the next book. And last on my continuing the book series list, I got to Beyond the Blue Event Horizon by Frederik Pohl. This book is the second book to a buddy read that we did on my channel for the book Gateway. Now, Gateway was a book that was really intense. There's a lot of really interesting discussion in our Discord if you want to go check that out. But that book was really about a really unlikable main character as he interacts with alien technology, but he also intersperses his therapy sessions with an AI therapist throughout the story. And it became a very introspective journey that not everybody got along with. It's kind of a bittersweet situation for me because it's not as tight and personal as the very first book was, but yet we're getting a lot more history and development on the alien tech, which I really liked. So I will be continuing with the series, although I have to say I still haven't decided which book I like better, but I do think that a lot of people who didn't like Bob in the first book will feel a lot better in the second one. So stay tuned on that series. Now let's move on to the series that I'm up to publishing date on. There are only 3 of these. The first one is a prequel sequel to the book Sea of Rust, and that is the book Day Zero. So the Sea of Rust is a book that is just a fun character journey about an AI, and he lives in the post-apocalyptic world where humans have already died off. So the author published Day Zero with this beautiful cover. This book was a very fun, almost sci-fi, tongue-in-cheek Calvin and Hobbes tale. So if that sounds awesome to you, you might really enjoy Day Zero. You could easily pick up Day Zero without having read Sea of Rust and still understand all of the references and everything that's happening. So I think you could read either of these in any order. But I had a good time with it. The one main critique I have of this entire series is that, just like with many other books out there that deal with AI characters are very anthropomorphized. They are very humanized. They even say things like, I had muscle memory, even though a robot doesn't have muscle memory. And they have feelings and emotions. They have the same motivations that humans do. And for me, this one was just a little bit less believable than maybe some of the other books out there. But as long as you're able to kind of suspend your disbelief, I think you might really get along with this one. Overall, I thought it was a fun candy read, not one to take super serious. Then I moved on to Those Beyond the Wall, which is the surprise book in this category. This is by Micah Johnson, and it's a follow-up book to The Space Between Worlds, which is a really fun book that I haven't talked about on my channel very much, and it deals with a dark, gritty dystopian future and parallel universes. And it hit me hard, this particular book. And so I was really excited to pick up the second one. The second one, it deals with some of the familiar characters, but a different main character perspective than the first book. I really got along super well with this book. I loved returning to the world. I thought that the storytelling was maybe a little bit more compelling in this story than it was in the first one. And I really, really shockingly loved the story. I cannot wait to buy it when it comes out in paperback because it was a this year release. So I really had a good time with it, but I know that I might be a minority opinion because one of my really good friends, Rachel from the Shades of Orange, really did not like this one. So, you know, to each their own, but I really, really enjoyed it. So check that one off for me. The last one in this category is going to be Heaven's River by Dennis Taylor. Speaking of fantastic audiobooks, perfect audiobook narrators, this is the fourth book in the We Are Bobiverse, or the Bobiverse, as some people call it. The follow-up to the series that starts with We Are Legion, We Are Bob. And I love this series. It is just one of those comfort reads that I love listening to, that I can't believe I hadn't gotten to the fourth book until now. This book follows Bob on one of his many adventures, and Heaven's River is actually the name of the particular planet settlement that has some new alien creatures that he gets to interact with and have many adventures solving problems and trying to save the world and all the creatures on it, etc., etc. This series is very episodic as well, although I do very much love this series. It's one that I'm really glad I didn't read in subsequent order back to back. It's one that I think is a perfect palate cleanser read. However, I do love this series and I do plan on picking up the next book that is supposed to come out later this year. So I'm super ready for that one to come out. And finally, we're going to get into the series that I have finished. So I have 7 series here for you that I have finished. So let's start with the biggest series, and that's going to be the Forever series. So as many of you know, I did a Forever War buddy read earlier this year, and I decided that I loved the Forever War so much that I was going to pick up the rest of the Forever series. Now, some people say that this is a trilogy, and some people say, no, it's only a duology, and I don't really care. I see it as a trilogy because all of them have forever in the title, and they don't always have to have the same main character, unfortunately, to be in the same series, as Becky Chambers has showed us all. But anyway, I read both Forever Free and Forever Peace to complete the Forever trilogy, or at least that's what I'm calling it right now. So, Forever Free continues with our main character, Mandela, after he's out of the military, and just continues with his story. He and several veterans have to go back into space and experience time dilation at least one more time, trying to deal with the man problem. I'm not going to explain that if you don't know what that means. And I think that Haldeman, the author, really tried to answer a lot of the lingering questions that there were left in the first book. which actually, in my opinion, somewhat cheapened the first book, and things got too easily explained, in my opinion. He also got pretty heavily into religion and politics in this book, and I think it was a detriment to the story. This is one of those books, Forever Free, that I would put on the shelf with Ready Player 2, which is, we just pretend like this didn't happen and move on. Like, I pretty strongly disliked it, and I think I would even go as far as saying it makes you not enjoy the main character of the story from the first book. So I would skip it if I were you. Now, alternatively, Forever Free, however, also won the Hugo Award, just like Forever War. And this one actually has some really interesting ideas. It follows a totally different character. We have a gentleman who is a Black physicist who gets drafted into the military and installed with a new kind of technology that allows all of the members of a particular military squad to experience each other's consciousness, which helps them as a team in missions. And then, of course, when he is no longer a part of the military, he still has lingering, PTSD and psychological trauma from no longer being a part of that group. And of course, his girlfriend is very jealous of the connection that they had as a team, as a squad, especially the other females in that group. So she decides to go down to Mexico and get an illegal surgery done where she gets one of these military implants placed. And of course, things go wrong. And they go wrong both for the better and for the worse, because they end up discovering a cure for humanity's warlike nature. That's right. They kind of invent world peace.
I would have to say world peace.
Or at least a possibility of world peace. Now, my biggest critique of Forever Peace is that it's a lot of wishful thinking. But one of the things that it really has going for it is it likes to come up with this idea and play with it and say, what if we could? And I really enjoy those kinds of thought experiment books. So for me, Forever Peace works really well. Is it as good as Forever War? I don't think so. But I do have to say that it is one that I would recommend. It's definitely worth reading, and it might spawn some discussion. So I really recommend Forever Peace. And that trilogy is completed. Let's move on to an easier read, and that was a Adrian Tchaikovsky duology. I read The Expert Systems Champion, which is the follow-up to a novella duology that begins with The Expert Systems Brother. Now, I really liked The Expert Systems Brother, but The Expert Systems Champion, it's the first 2-star I've ever given to Adrian Tchaikovsky. It is a huge step down. I feel like he tries to take the plot in a totally different direction, and he tries to do too much with it for a novella. And if he wanted to make it this complex and this interesting, then he needed to make it at least a book, maybe 2. And because he didn't have that time and space to develop a lot of these ideas, it just comes out as a jumble, and it's very poorly executed, and in my opinion, all very poorly done. I would very much recommend not picking that one up. Moving on to other disappointing follow-up reads in a duology, we have The Children of God by Mary Doria Russell. So The Sparrow has become something of a cult classic for me on my channel. I really have fallen in love with The Sparrow, and I was so excited to pick up The Children of God. I couldn't wait to see what else she came up with for our wayward Jesuit priest. And I was nothing but disappointed by this follow-up book. I felt like we knew we were going to go back to the alien planet, and the way it was done was very poor. I also thought that the handling of our priest's trauma was done very poorly. They even talk about trigger topics like some suicidal thoughts that I thought were handled very flippantly. And overall, I think that the main character got over his problems too easily. I think things were handled very poorly. And I did not enjoy Children of God. So I'm really glad that I got that one on audiobook and did not actually buy the book for that one. Still loving The Sparrow, but maybe skip Children of God, at least based off of my personal experience. So I'll move on from there without spoiling anything, of course. Then we finally have another trilogy that I have completed, and that is the First Sister trilogy by Lyndon Lewis. This one I read both Second Rebel, the second book, and Last Hero, the third book, to complete this trilogy. Now, these two books I was really excited to read, and I did end up picking up back to back. The Second Rebel really enhances the excitement and the action from the first book that I thought was really well done. I couldn't wait to see the next step in the journey, and it kind of started reminding me a little bit of Red Rising in the best way. I also really started enjoying some of the puns and some of the really tough decisions that this author did not shy away from. I really felt like the second book just flowed perfectly into the third book, so I really have a hard time differentiating between the two. I have to say that overall, I was satisfied by this trilogy. I thought the ending was perfectly reasonable. I thought the action was really good. I don't think it's perfect. I do have a couple of very specific complaints about the ending of this trilogy and how long that last book was. I think that we could have narrowed some of this action down significantly. I do think that there were extra characters in here that were placed for very specific political agendas rather than actually adding to the story. But outside of all of those typical complaints, my overall feel about this trilogy is that I would recommend. I really enjoyed it. The first book in the series is definitely my favorite, but I was really happy to finish it, and I do feel satisfied with the end. Then we can move on to The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. This is the second to last series duology that I finished. I really loved Handmaid's Tale, and The Testaments is kind of a follow-up to it. It's an alternate perspective in the same dystopian world as The Handmaid's Tale, only we focus on the women who are cultivated as aunties or guards of the handmaids and this whole crazy system that they have developed for the subjugation of women. And the aunties really are in the know a lot more than the handmaids are, but a lot of how the information is distributed is very tightly under control, so nobody really knows it all. I thought The Testaments was an easier to follow story. It didn't have the shock factor that The Handmaid's Tale did, but it had a lot of specific answers that I felt like were needed for you to really appreciate The Handmaid's Tale the first go round. I think that the TV show, which I haven't completed, by the way, did a really good job of combining a lot of the information between the two books. But I would recommend The Testaments. I had a really good time with it. And overall, it was one of the ones that I was really pleased with. And I will be definitely looking for that in paperback. As a matter of fact, I think I already bought it. So definitely go check out my Instagram for a picture of that as well. The last book series that I completed is going to be another duology, and that one is by Daniel Suarez, starting with Demon, or Damon, however you want to say that. And the second and final book in that duology is Freedom TM. This one was probably one of the biggest highlights of the month. I was incredibly blown away by this end of this duology. It had everything I was expecting and more. It was such a fun thriller. I was riveted, stuck to my seat, loved every second of this story, and it ended so satisfactorily. Chef's kiss, super perfection. Really enjoyed the series. It was the perfect thriller for a summer read if that's what you're looking for. I really thought that Freedom TM was way better plotted than the first one. And I went out and actually ended up finding Damon, the first book in hardcover, and I'm looking for the sequel, Freedom TM. I will be reading more Daniel Suarez very soon, so definitely keep your eye on that. He is very rapidly becoming an author that I am really excited to read. So you guys, that's it for all of the series that I have furthered or completed for my Finish the Series challenge in May. Let me know in the comment section down below if you participated in the challenge and if you got any series completed or furthered. And remember to join us next year for this exact same one. Until next time.